Story 34. Investigating a series of home invasions was a grim task. The cases were piling up, each one leaving families shaken and police baffled. The pattern was consistent: the intruders entered without leaving a trace, taking nothing of value but leaving a sense of fear in their wake. I was a detective assigned to the case, tasked with finding the link between the break-ins and uncovering who was behind them. The latest incident took me to a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. The home was modest, the kind where kids played in the front yard and neighbors watched out for each other. But the break-in had shattered that sense of security. The owners, an elderly couple, had heard noises in the night, but by the time they called the police, the intruders were gone. I searched the house, looking for any clues or signs of forced entry. The doors and windows were intact, the locks unbroken. It was as if the intruders had appeared and vanished without a trace. But as I made my way to the attic, I noticed something unusual: a small, hidden compartment in the rafters. Inside, I found a strange object, a doll, old and worn, with a camera embedded in its eye. The doll was unsettling, its porcelain face cracked and faded. But what caught my attention was the camera. It was small, barely noticeable, and clearly designed for surveillance. I took it back to the station and had the tech team extract the footage from the camera's memory. What I saw made my blood run cold. The footage showed various locations around the city: homes, parks, and public places. It was a montage of different scenes, each one recorded from the doll's perspective. But what disturbed me most was when I saw my own apartment on the screen. The footage showed my living room, my kitchen, even my bedroom. The doll had been there, recording without my knowledge. I felt a surge of fear, the realization that I had been watched, that my privacy had been violated. The footage was recent, recorded just a few days before the latest home invasion. It was clear that the doll was part of a larger network, used to gather information and track the movements of potential targets. I shared my findings with the rest of the team, and we quickly realized that the home invasions were part of a coordinated effort. The doll was used to scout locations, to identify vulnerabilities, and track the routines of the residents. It was a surveillance tool, hidden in plain sight, and it had been moving through the city without detection. The investigation took on a new urgency. We needed to find out who was behind the doll, who had placed it in the attic, and why my apartment was on the list of locations. I started to feel paranoid, wondering if other hidden cameras were watching me, tracking my every move. The sense of safety that came with being a detective was shattered, replaced by a constant feeling of being observed. We traced the origins of the doll to a local pawn shop, where it had been sold to an unknown buyer. The shopkeeper couldn't remember who had purchased it, but he mentioned that it was part of a collection, a series of similar dolls that had come from an estate sale. The estate belonged to a man who had a history of surveillance and voyeurism, but he had died years earlier. The deeper we dug, the more tangled the web became. The doll was just one piece of a larger puzzle, a puzzle that seemed to stretch across the city and involve more people than we had anticipated. The home invasions were part of a network, a system designed to exploit the vulnerability of ordinary people and turn their lives into a source of surveillance. I knew I had to be careful, to watch my back, because the doll with the camera in its eye suggested that I was not immune to this network's reach. The investigation was ongoing, but the fear lingered, the sense that someone was always watching. My apartment no longer felt like a safe haven, and I began to question every shadow, every noise in the night. The home invasions, the hidden doll, and the network of surveillance were a stark reminder that even the most ordinary places could hide dark secrets. The doll had opened a door to a world I had never imagined, a world where privacy was an illusion and safety was never guaranteed. I knew that unraveling this network would take time, but I was determined to find out who was behind it and bring them to justice. Story 35. I'd always been drawn to the forgotten and hidden crevices of the world. So when I took the job as a groundskeeper at the old university, it wasn't just the sprawling lawns and ancient trees that called to me, it was the secrets that such places always seemed to hold. It was during a routine clearing out of an old maintenance shed that I stumbled upon something that would forever change my perception of the campus. Behind stacks of rusty tools and dusty tarps, I found a wooden chest. Inside, amid various discarded items, lay an old map. It was brittle and yellowed, but clearly detailed a series of tunnels beneath the campus. The map was a labyrinth of lines with markings and notes scrawled in a faded ink. There was an air of mystery that whispered to me from the paper, an invitation to explore the unknown. I asked around. The professors, the administrative staff, even the oldest of the janitorial team, none of them knew or admitted to knowing about any underground tunnels. Their ignorance, or was it denial, only fueled my curiosity. I had to see for myself what lay beneath. The entrance, according to the map, was behind the boiler room of the oldest building on campus. It took me several nights of poking around under the guise of inspecting the old heating system to find it. A false wall, cleverly disguised to look like the rest of the foundation, hid a narrow, descending staircase. I remember pausing, the beam of my flashlight trembling slightly in my hand as I considered turning back. But the allure of the unknown was too strong. The air grew cooler as I descended. The walls, initially rough and crudely hewn, soon became smoother, as if molded by careful hands or perhaps by time itself. The tunnel stretched on, forking and winding in ways that seemed to deviate from the map. Every now and then, markings etched into the stone seemed to serve as cryptic guideposts. It was deeper in the labyrinth that I found the room. It was perfectly circular, the walls lined with shelves filled with dusty bottles, strange metallic instruments, and piles of leather-bound journals. In the center stood a stone table, atop which lay a large, open book. Its pages were filled with diagrams and writings in a language I didn't recognize, accompanied by illustrations that twisted my stomach with unease. The drawings depicted creatures, humanoid but distorted, with elongated limbs and sunken, empty eyes. As I flipped through the pages, the air grew thick, heavy with the smell of damp and decay. A sound began to echo through the tunnels, a faint, dragging shuffle. I snapped the book shut, and the sound ceased. Heart hammering. I decided it was time to leave. I retraced my steps, the silence oppressive, broken only by my own heavy breathing. But as I neared the exit, the shuffling returned, louder this time, accompanied by a low, moaning wail. Panic clawed at my chest. I broke into a run, the map forgotten, my only thought to reach the light of the surface. I emerged into the boiler room, gasping for air, the door slamming shut behind me. I leaned against it, listening. After a moment, the sounds faded, swallowed by the depths of the earth. I never went back, and I never spoke of what I'd found. The map was burned, its ashes scattered to the winds. Weeks later, I resigned from my position, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, of whispers carried on the wind. The university remained, its secrets buried deep beneath layers of stone and silence, its whispers only a memory in my mind. Yet sometimes in the dead of night, I still hear the faint, dragging shuffle of something unseen, forever roaming the darkness below. Story 36. The historic district of Old Willows Lane was known for its picturesque Victorian houses, each with its own story and secrets buried in the creaking wood and peeling paint. As a first-time homebuyer with a penchant for the past, I was drawn to these homes, eager to breathe new life into one of them. That's how I found myself standing at the threshold of a particularly forlorn-looking property, its windows boarded up, ivy clawing its way up the faded siding. The realtor, who had handed me the keys with a mix of reluctance and relief, mentioned that the house had stood empty for years. "It's a fixer-upper," she had said, a term that here seemed an understatement. As I pushed open the heavy front door, the air inside greeted me with the musty smell of abandonment. I wandered through the rooms, each step stirring up ghosts of dust motes into the shafts of light slicing through the boarded windows. It was in the living room that I first noticed the footprints. They were fresh, the edges sharp and clear in the thick layer of dust on the hardwood floor. A chill ran down my spine. Someone had been here recently. Curiosity piqued. I followed the trail. It meandered through the house, skirting around an old grand piano, beneath a chandelier teetering precariously by a thread, and then to a small hallway closet. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, instead of the expected shelves or old coats, there was a ladder, its top disappearing into a dark void above. The house's blueprints, old and brittle, had shown no indication of a space above this closet. It was as if someone had added it without a trace, hidden from view and forgotten by all but one. With a mixture of fear and intrigue, I climbed the ladder, each rung groaning under my weight. The space at the top was cramped and pitch black. Fumbling with my flashlight, I illuminated an attic-like room, its low ceiling pressing down heavy with shadows. It was empty, save for a small, dusty trunk in one corner. The air was stifling, thick with the scent of old fabric and wood. There was something unsettling about the room, a sense of interrupted privacy, as if I had stumbled into a secret still in the making. As my light swept across the walls, I noticed marking scratches that formed words. Never alone read one, the letters jagged and frantic. They watch warned another. The simplicity of the messages scrawled in desperation sent a shiver through me. I approached the trunk, the air around me growing colder, denser. Inside, I found an assortment of objects, a few old books with tattered covers, a broken pocket watch, and a small black and white photo of a woman, her expression somber, eyes hauntingly familiar, as if I had seen her somewhere before. As I picked up the photo, the floorboards below creaked loudly, a sound out of place in the stillness. Panicked, I hurried back to the ladder, descended with shaky legs, and rushed through the house, the footprints I had followed now overlaid with my own in a chaotic dance. Once outside, I breathed deeply, trying to shake off the claustrophobia and dread that clung to me. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. As I turned for one last look at the house, I saw movement behind a second-story window, the flicker of a curtain, though all had been boarded up. My heart seized. There was no denying it, the house, though abandoned, was far from empty. I returned the keys to the realtor the next morning, recounting none of what I had discovered. She seemed eager to be rid of them, her eyes darting away from mine as she spoke of other properties that might suit me. But as I left, I glanced back at her office window. There, pinned to the bulletin board, was the same photo I had found in the trunk. The woman's solemn eyes watched me go, a silent guardian of her domain, and a reminder that some secrets are best left undisturbed.